Good afternoon, everyone. I once again welcome you for the second session of this online faculty development program. The topic for this second session is nanopharmaceuticals for Alzheimer's, and the speaker is Dr. Giriraj Kulkarni, sir. And presently he is working as a professor and principal, Gokaraju College of Pharmacy, Hyderabad, Telangana. He is holding Dr. Giriraj Kulkarni sir is holding a doctorate in pharmaceutical sciences from Dr. MGR Medical Institute, Chennai. He has got experience of 26 years in both teaching and research experience, and is involved in the development of natural multifunctional excipients, controlled release, and targeted drug delivery systems, protein and peptide delivery systems, hydrogel technology, herbal formulation development. He has conceptualized and established a laboratory for pharmaceutical and bio technological research, and he has managed research sites, conducted stability, bioavailability, and bioequivalence studies according to international guidelines. He has handled various pharmaceutical manufacturing equipments and test and analytical instruments. He has acquired biotechnological skills, plant and animal cell culture, recombinant DNA technology, and handled related equipments. He has worked with dedication in teams and as a team leader, competently motivated, guided research teams, completed projects within targeted cost, time, and frames. And he has reviewed all relevant information and aspects and takes an informed decision. And he has accomplishes tasks with a focused and relentless approach. Sir has received many awards, honors, and out of which some important are: he has received a Best Paper Award for the year 2002 from Indian Drug Manufacturers Association, Mumbai, for the research paper that is evaluation of binding properties of Plantago ovata and trigonal of Phoenum gracium mucilages, published in the Indian Drugs. And he has received Outstanding Excellence Award for contribution to pharmaceutical education and research by Pharmaceutical Royal International Society during the National Pharma Conference in 2019 at Bhopal. And also he has received one of the prestigious award, that is APJ Abdul Kalam Research Thinker Award in 2019 from Amity Institute of Pharmacy, Amity University, Uttar Pradesh, during Great Innovation Challenges in the 2019. Sir has guided 10 PhD students, and as well as right now is guiding around 5 students. And he has guided for 54 students, more than 54 students for M.Pharma dissertation work. And to his credit, he has got around 146 publications, out of which 91 are in the research papers, peer-reviewed journals. And he has presented many papers in the various conferences, both national and international conferences. Around 78 he has presented, out of which the many are with this brief introduction. Now I request Dr. Giriraj Kulkarni sir to deliver his lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible clearly?
Yes, sir. You're audible, sir.
Thank you. I will start sharing my screen. Can you see my screen? Is it visible?
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Okay, fine. Okay. This is the area nanotechnology has taken nowadays. Almost it has created a lot of interest in almost all the fields. Everything is becoming nano. Our computers are becoming nano. Our mobile phones are becoming nano. Like that. Similarly, our drugs are also becoming nano. Formulations are also becoming nano. But diseases are not becoming nano. So here, for the treatment of Alzheimer therapy, in this, how I got interest. Actually, even though I am a pharmaceutics person doing research in different areas, here I got into this Alzheimer's of late. Maybe since last 5-6 years, our team is working in this therapy of Alzheimer's. So first, before going to the details of all these, let us see what is Alzheimer, what causes Alzheimer, and how we have to treat. What are the available therapies for Alzheimer disease, and how nanotechnology can help in overcoming the symptoms and problems associated with Alzheimer. This is what, along with whatever work we have done, our group has done some work. I will be presenting little bit of that also. So I request all the participants, please mute yourself. So the first thing is dementia. Okay, so dementia is the one where we find loss of cognitive functioning. Now we should understand what is this cognitive functioning. First thing is, we always think. This thinking process is a cognitive function. Remembering the things, whatever we had studied somewhere 25 years, 30 years before, we still remember. Even whatever we studied in first standard also we remember. That is a cognitive function. And reasoning, whatever action we are doing, for that there should be some reasoning. Whatever research you are doing, you have a logical sequence of that. You have a logical thinking of the research what you are doing. Now, all these things arise because of the, we combinedly call them as cognitive functions of the brain. And this is at loss in dementia. Actually, Alzheimer's is a disease which is actually a leading cause for dementia. And naturally, as we age, normally our cognitive functioning will be slightly reduced, but not too much. It will be slightly reduced. But in case of dementia, the thing is, this cognitive functioning will be reduced to a greater extent that daily life and activities will also be affected. And presently, dementia as on date is almost around nearly 47 million of elderly people worldwide are affected by dementia. And this number is almost more than double, around nearly 131 million. It is predicted to become nearly 131 million by 2050. Now, what is the cause of this? It is because of increased life expectancy. Normally, because of development of medical field, pharmaceutical field, we come across and we have almost treatments for majority of the diseases. Except few, we have treatment for majority, hence life expectancy is increased. The number of aged people is increasing. Because of this, since dementia is one way or other way associated with the process of aging. So the people with dementia will be more by 2050. But it is not only aging. If it is simple healthy aging, what we call, dementia will not increase this much. But it is increasing rapidly. Out of proportion increase in the dementia is because of many other factors. Let us see those factors in the forthcoming slides. And for dementia, many diseases are there. Any disease is affecting CNS, central nervous system, brain, and others, they can lead to dementia. And Alzheimer's is one of the most important cause for dementia in the elderly people. Now, what is this Alzheimer and why it is caused? Alzheimer disease, it is associated with irreversible neuronal loss. Neurons will be lost, they will die. And normally, usually in the earlier developmental phase, neurons will multiply, they will develop. And in the brain also, we have stem cells. If there is any loss of neurons, these stem cells will divide, they will convert themselves into neurons, and then they will try to overcome the problem. But still, if the loss is at a very high rate, then the reproduction rate or the cell multiplication rate, then there will be naturally a downfall in the number of neuronal cells which are functional in the brain. And this is also due to vascular toxicity. Normally, Alzheimer's disease is clinically, when you say how a person, what are the symptoms, how do we say a person is affected by Alzheimer's? Normally, it is by progressive decline in the cognition, thinking, persons will start forgetting the things, they may forget the names, they may forget the address, they may forget some words while speaking. All of a sudden it happens. Normally in age-old patient people, it happens that they say normally that the word is there only in the tip of my tongue, but it is not coming out. They know the word, but it's not coming out. That is a cognitive loss. And loss of memory, that is another symptom of Alzheimer's. Deterioration of judgment decision. Whenever we have to decide something, whenever we have to make something, even if we want to go and have a cup of coffee or water, that is also judgment and decision. Our musculoskeletal system should coordinate with the CNS. So all these things will not happen. And deterioration of orientation to physical surroundings and language at the later stage, when the disease is highly advanced, the people may not know the physical surroundings, where they are. They will do something which is irrelevant to the surroundings. Or sometimes they may forget the language also, and they will forget to talk because they have forgotten the language. And histologically, when brain sections are taken, then two most important things which you can see in the sections of the brain of Alzheimer patient is intracellular neurofibrillary tangles. That is called as phosphorylated tau protein. So how this phosphorylated tau protein is formed, let us see. And second is extracellular amyloid beta plaques. So here one tau protein is formed, the tangles of tau protein will be formed inside the cell, and outside the cell amyloid beta protein plaques will be formed. So both of these you can see here in the picture that. So in the first picture you can see usually this tau protein is a protein which is needed for the maintenance of this microtubule which surrounds the neuron, and this presence of this microtubule will stabilize the neurons. And sometimes hyperphosphorylation of this tau protein, this blue colored structure is the tau protein, which is required for stabilization of the microtubule, and this gets hyperphosphorylated. Extra phosphorylation of this will make it unfit for stabilization of the microtubule. In that case, what happens? It will not come out because of this hyperphosphorylation. The neuron in the neuronal cell it is produced, but it does not come out, and it will get accumulated within the cell, leading to finally cell death. That is called as tangles of tau protein. Because of this tangle, protein is not coming out. Protein expression has occurred, but it has not come out. It has not stabilized the microtubule, because of which one side inside the cell you have a lot of deposition of the unnecessary protein, and outside microtubule structure becomes destabilized, because of which the whole neuronal skeleton is gone. So nerve cell will die. And secondly, this amyloid beta, A beta, this protein will be expressed and it will come out and it will form deposits. In between the neuronal cells, it forms deposits. So both these are common things which are found. And actually speaking, these two are thought as causes for loss of cognitive function, but we are not sure. Now, whatever present treatments are there, they are targeting either to tau or to A beta, but both of them are not actually 100% sure. If you treat these two, it is not 100% ensured that Alzheimer's disease will be reduced or it will be reversed, because once neurons are dead, they are dead. And what are the causes? Why it happens? Why Alzheimer's has to happen? Because first and foremost cause is aging. As we age, normally age-related atrophy will occur, because of which neuronal cells will also stop dividing or their cell division rate will decrease. That is one thing. But apart from that, other causes are also there, which is enhancing the rate of Alzheimer's advancement. So here, some of the causes, we can classify them as genetic causes. Some are genetically predisposed to get this disease. Second, lifestyle. What kind of lifestyle we are leading? If you are an active person, then chances of getting such Alzheimer's is less. If you are leading a sedentary life, then chances are more. And there are environmental factors also which trigger this Alzheimer's. But these are roughly identified factors. But exact cause, why it starts, is not known to anyone till now. These are some of the identified causes, and some of them can be treated, many of them cannot be treated. That is the as on date thing about Alzheimer's. Here, one more thing. Through some of my associates, I found that after introduction, some people told me that after introduction of pressure cooker, Alzheimer's has increased. So I asked how. Then I got the reasoning that pressure cookers, nowadays we are getting stainless steel pressure cookers, but earlier pressure cookers were aluminum. And whenever you cook anything, aluminum ions will be released into the food which you are cooking in the aluminum utensils. And aluminum deposition is also considered as one of the cause for Alzheimer's disease. This tau and amyloid beta precipitation will start because of aluminum in the brain. So that is one thing. But if aluminum is causing it, then earlier our ancestors used gold bhasma, suvarna bhasma, what we call, or silver bhasmas are being used to treat same CNS problems. But how they act and how this aluminum act and how these two are different from each other in their action is not yet clear to us. But some of the causative factors here are age. As we know, age is one of the things. After around 60 years, people say, 60 के बाद सटिया गया, means brain has stopped working or dysfunction starts. And family history, that is genetic cause. And sometimes if there is a head trauma, head injury or something like that, that may precipitate this Alzheimer's disease. And one of the most important thing what we find here is air pollution, particulate pollution in the air. It is not, we are not talking about chemical pollution, we are talking about breathable particles which enter through our lungs. These particulate pollution is also responsible for Alzheimer's. Then poor sleep pattern. If the person is not sleeping properly, if you are waking up till late night, 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, if you sleep and get up by 10 o'clock in the morning. So normally a proverb is there, early to bed, early to rise. So that we have to follow. Otherwise, Alzheimer's disease is 100% going to happen. And excessive alcohol. This is another cause of precipitation of Alzheimer's. And lifestyle, like our lack of exercise. If you lead a sedentary life, chances of getting Alzheimer's will be more. And obesity, if the person is too much obese, chances are more. High cholesterol, that also is another cause. Smoking, some of the chain smokers will definitely have a higher chance of getting Alzheimer's. Hypertension and diabetes, these two, hypertension and diabetes are the two diseases which are root cause of many other diseases in the body. So we have to be much careful about these two. Now, what are the treatments available? Even though the cause is not much known, but we know the symptoms, and most of the treatments which are available as on date for Alzheimer's, they are actually targeting either A beta protein or tau protein. Or another thing is in Alzheimer's, acetylcholine, production of acetylcholine in the brain will be reduced. So anything which enhances acetylcholine production can overcome the symptoms of Alzheimer's to certain extent. So either acetylcholine esterases or N-methyl D-aspartate receptor antagonists. They are the main drugs which are used for Alzheimer's as on date. Like in case of acetylcholine esterase inhibitors, tacrine, rivastigmine, galantamine, and donepezil are commonly used drugs. These are the drugs which have got FDA approval and are available in the market. And in case of NMDAR, memantine is the only drug which is available. Apart from these two, most of the people suggest that curcumin is one of the things which shows betterment of symptoms in Alzheimer's. So curcumin, how it works? Actually, it targets amyloid beta and tau. Both the proteins will be targeted by curcumin, and it modulates neuroinflammation. It reduces the neuroinflammation. Because of this amyloid beta and tau, inflammation will be there in the brain. Curcumin reduces it because it's a natural anti-inflammatory substance. And it is also an antioxidant. It reduces the oxidative stress in the brain. And in Alzheimer's disease, one of the major thing is oxidative stress. There is too much oxidative stress. For example, aluminium. How this aluminium causes this disease? Because of oxidative stress. So this oxidative stress can be reduced through curcumin or through any antioxidant. That's why usually in Ayurveda, they say that use of Chyawanprash can protect you, or it is an immunomodulator, and also use of Chyawanprash with Suvarna Bhasma or Silver Bhasma will help in maintenance of memory. Memory maintenance means here it will postpone or it will reduce the oxidative stress in the brain, and it reduces the chances of Alzheimer's. That is one thing which is not yet completely proved. And the success of Alzheimer's treatment, because the problem is precipitation of tau and A beta are happening in brain. So the thing is, whatever drug you are using, it may be acetylcholine esterase or it may be memantine or anything, they have to reach brain. And reaching of the drug to the brain itself is a big headache. It will not reach. Many of the drugs will not reach brain because we have a protective mechanism called as blood-brain barrier. As BBB is there is a problem. So it does not allow drugs to enter into brain. So now let us see how we can overcome this BBB. What is this BBB? How can be overcome? So if you see blood-brain barrier, it is a specialized structural, physiological, and biochemical barrier. Okay, so three things are there here. It is a structural barrier, it is a physiological barrier, it is also a biochemical barrier. So it serves as a first interface between the changeable environment of blood in the body and in the brain. Between brain and the other parts of the body, there is a difference. So between extracellular fluids in the CNS and the blood, whatever exchanges of ions can occur, how that exchange will occur is controlled by this blood-brain barrier. Normally, if you see the normal endothelial cells of the body, you can see that is the blood capillary made up of endothelial cells, and these cells are joined together to make a pipeline-like structure, and these cells joined together, but they are not 100% leak-proof. All the blood capillaries in the body, they are leaky. They have to be leaky, because otherwise oxygen, glucose and all other components which have to be circulated through blood cannot get circulated. So here they don't have in the body. The thing is, the capillaries don't have tight junctions. Tight junction means completely sealed, M-seal. Once you apply M-seal, there will not be any leakage. So similar thing should happen, but it will not be like that. In the body, capillaries are leaky, whereas once they reach brain, now you find M-seal on all the joints. What is this M-seal? It is made up of a special type of cell in the brain called as astrocytes. These astrocytes, wherever there are joints between the capillaries, these joints will be actually sealed by these astrocytes, so that all the joints in the capillary are covered. You can say one layer of astrocyte coating is there on the blood capillaries in the brain. So this astrocyte does not allow, this will make the joints tight junctions. So there will not be any leakage here. So the blood capillaries in the brain are 100% non-leaky. And because of this only, whatever is there in the blood capillary cannot come out. Molecules will not come out. That's why blood-brain barrier stops everything. So if you see this blood-brain barrier, like small unchanged molecules like carbon dioxide, oxygen, they can pass through the cells still through endothelial cells as well as through astrocytes. These are required things. Their exchange will occur. And slightly larger molecules like amino acids, glucose, fats, they will be exchanged through special transporters. Without transporters, amino acid, glucose and fats cannot cross from inside to outside or outside to inside. Movement is not possible. And large molecules, electrically charged molecules, they can never go out from, if they are there in the capillary, they will remain in the capillary. They will have a virtual tour of the brain and they will come back to the systemic circulation. They will not get entry into the brain because they are charged. So one important thing about blood-brain barrier is, if anything is lipophilic, uncharged, completely unionized, then it can cross the cell membrane, whereas charged thing, slightly ionized thing, they cannot cross. Okay, or if there is any water soluble molecule like amino acid, glucose and all, they can move through the specific transporters only. And now because of this, as we have seen, majority of our drug molecules come into this. Some charge will be there on the drug molecule, so they can't move. They cannot come out of the blood capillary. Hence, whatever treatment you do will be waste only. It will not reach the brain cells. Now, how to do the strategy to cross this blood-brain barrier? So, actually, to cross the blood-brain barrier, we have two strategies normally, which is being adopted. One is invasive method. Directly you inject into CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. CSF injections can be done. So like that you inject the drug directly into CSF, but that is little dangerous also. That is a invasive method. Or else sometimes what they do, you can cut open the skull, directly put the, or you can create a small micro needle, micro sized hole in the skull, inject drug through that into the brain directly. That is the only way. That is invasive method. Non-invasive means we have to find out some way so that blood-brain barrier can be crossed without creating any physical damage. So let us see these non-invasive methods. Under invasive method, what we do is, as I told, directly we are putting the drug into the brain. So in case of animal studies also, streptozotocin induced Alzheimer-like situation. In this case, what we do, normally we make a hole in the skull of the mouse, directly inject streptozotocin into that. Or normally the mouse skull will be very soft. It is not hard. With the help of specific needle, we can make a hole and inject streptozotocin, create Alzheimer-like condition in the brain. So that is the accepted Alzheimer model for animal studies. So here that is a invasive method. So what we do, temporarily we open the tight junctions by high osmolar solutions. You can give high osmotic pressure solutions so that blood-brain astrocytes will slightly open up. Then through the leaky things, the drugs can come out. That is one thing. Or else, second is injecting the drugs directly, intracerebral injections, or via catheter. You can put somewhere else, and then with the help of a catheter, the catheter will reach the brain, and there it will release the drug. That is also a possibility. Or else during surgery, directly drug can be applied into the brain without anything, because skull is cut open. That is invasive. But the problem with this invasive methods is, normally risk of infection will be there, because brain is most important organ and we can't afford infections into the brain or creating any other problem in the brain. So later, because of the invasive method, a condition may reach where patient may feel better with the disease rather than with the treatment. So that situation should not come. And potential damage to the brain tissue can happen. Because when you are injecting, you may damage the neurons at that place. Or sometimes uncontrolled drug distribution can happen. Because of this uncontrolled drug distribution, wherever needed at the site of action, like hippocampus, we need the drug. Hippocampus is the starting point of Alzheimer, where you need the drug. If the drug gets distributed completely throughout the brain uniformly, amount of drug reaching hippocampus may be very less. So in that case, there may be problem. There may not be any efficacy in the treatment. Treatment may be there, but it is very slow. Progression of treatment will be very less or nil. So in case of non-invasive, what we do, normally IV injection will be done. Even though IV is again invasive only, but we are not directly doing any damage to the brain, skull and other organs directly. Here through IV injection, we give specified formulation which will go to brain via circulation, and then it will cross the blood-brain barrier. That is one way. Our second and most common approach, and this is the approach which is becoming most popular among the researchers, is intranasal administration. Apply through nose, because in the nose we have two types of nerves, olfactory nerves and trigeminal nerves. And if the drug reaches nose through olfactory, it can directly reach the brain tissues, or it will get into CSF. And similarly, through trigeminal nerves also, it can enter into CSF or it can enter into brain tissue. If it enters into CSF, then also it will get equilibrated with brain. So if you administer anything through nasal route, through this olfactory and trigeminal nerves, it will reach directly to brain tissue and CSF, and equilibration will occur between these two. And through this nasal route, there is another possibility also. Through respiratory mucosa, it may enter into lungs, then into systemic circulation. Through respiratory mucosa, directly it may enter into systemic circulation, or some amount of the drug through nose, it may enter into our throat. We will swallow, it will reach GIT and then into systemic circulation. Or whatever drug has entered into brain through olfactory and trigeminal nerves, that will also, after some time, it will get equilibrated with the other tissues of the body. From brain, it will come out. Then once again, it will come back to systemic circulation only. But in nasal pathway, what advantage we have? The drugs enter the brain. Once, only thing is it has to cross the nasal epithelium. Once it crosses nasal epithelium, directly it will take entry into brain. That means here blood-brain barrier is not there if you administer through nasal route. And normally, non-invasive methods like intranasal administration are preferred than doing a surgery, making a hole in the skull and all those things. Instead of all those, non-invasive methods are patient friendly, so they are better. And here, nanotechnology can help to overcome this problem of blood-brain barrier crossing. Even though we say olfactory nerves and trigeminal nerves directly send the drug to brain and CSF, but the amount of drug reaching the brain and CSF is negligible, very less, because you don't, the whatever formulation you are using does not stay in the nasal cavity for a long time. Within few seconds to 1 minute, it will cross, or at the most 1 or 2 minutes. If it is a mucoadhesive formulation, it may remain in the nose for 1 or 2 minutes, or at the most 5 minutes. Within that, the drug has to be released. It has to cross the mucosa and then it has to enter into tissue. So because of this very, very less limited contact time, amount of drug reaching CSF and brain tissue is very, very less. So here nanotechnology can help to overcome this problem. So what is this nanotechnology then? If you see nanotechnology, practically if we see, it is not any technology. We can't consider it as technology. It is actually it can be considered as material science only. And this nanotechnology was not evolved for any pharmaceutical and medical purposes. It was only made for engineering purposes, to miniaturize the instrument, reduce the size of all the equipments. This was developed. And the term nanotechnology was coined in 1974 by Norio Taniguchi from University of Tokyo. He was the person to coin this term nanotechnology. And this is actually based on scaling down of the existing technologies. Whatever machines are there, instruments are there, you reduce the size. Earlier, we used to have very big clocks. They have been reduced to table clocks. Further, they have been reduced to watches, right? So like that, miniaturization, that was the actual object of this nanotechnology. And how we can define it? It is the art and science of manipulating and rearranging individual atoms to create useful materials, devices, and systems. So nano, when we call nano, the size should be within some nanometers. Okay, so if you see hemoglobin size, one molecule of hemoglobin, it has 6.5 nanometer diameter of the hemoglobin. Viruses, they are bigger than hemoglobin, 10 to 100 nanometer. And human hair, you see, 100,000 nanometer. The diameter of human hair is 100,000 nanometer. Hemoglobin is 6.5 nanometer. So you can assume when we are developing nano formulations, which range between around some 100 to 200 nanometers, means we are developing a system which is almost as small as a virus. So in this, proper designing, proper controlling the release of drug and all these things actually are to be highly regulated, highly controlled. Otherwise, it will do whatever it wants. Chances of failure will be more because size is very small. So, okay, nanopharmaceuticals. If we come to nanotechnology, the next term is nanopharmaceuticals. Actually, these are submicron size particulate drug delivery systems with 10 to 1000 nanometer. 1000 nanometer means 1 micrometer. Within that, within that we need to have the size very small. So if it comes to micrometer, then it becomes microparticulate delivery system, not nano. So less than 1 micron should be the size. And normally what we do, we use the term nanopharmaceutical. Sometimes we call them as nanoparticles. We also use the term nanomedicine. All these are used synonymously. There is no much differentiation between all these as on date. And these nanopharmaceuticals can do normally, since because they have very small size, their surface area is enormous, because of which quick release, very fast release, that is the main objective of nanopharmaceuticals. But some nanopharmaceuticals can be made as controlled release, sustained release, targeted delivery systems also. Usually these nanoparticles and microparticles, they are used for cancer therapy. Well documented papers are available. You will find thousands of papers for the use of nanocarriers in cancer therapy. That is the major thing which is being used now. But next most attractive area is this neurodegenerative disorders. So if you see nanoscience, how this nanopharmaceuticals emerged. Here you can see the definition of nanopharmaceuticals as given by Rivera et al. So this was the paper published in 2010, where they have defined nanopharmaceuticals as pharmaceuticals engineered on nanoscale. That is, pharmaceuticals where the nanomaterial plays the pivotal therapeutic role or adds additional functionality to the previous compound, means existing compound. For example, simple drug is available. If you convert the same drug into nano formulation, drug crystals, nanocrystals. So nanocrystals will have some added functionality. Their dissolution will be higher than the normal crystals. So if you are increasing dissolution, you are adding a function to that. So normally this, as I told, the concept of nanotechnology came first, and then pharmacy people got quickly adopted. They quickly adopted this technology and they created nanopharmaceuticals. Earlier, we were calling them, many of them as they were there, like colloidal gold was there. Now, we don't use the term colloidal gold. Instead, it is called as gold nanoparticle. Okay, so such colloidal drug delivery systems were there before we termed the word nanopharmaceuticals. They were called colloidal drug delivery. Now they are called, all the colloidal delivery systems have become nanoformulations now. Now the question is why these nanopharmaceuticals are needed. First thing, enhanced stability and long-term storage. Because of their nano size, their stability is high. Like if you make a suspension, it will settle. Nano suspensions will not settle because of their nano size only. And increased solubility of the components because enormous surface area is there. Surface area volume ratio is very high, because of which more surface is exposed, higher dissolution. That is the actual main aim of nanopharmaceutical. Faster dissolution. Even if you have insoluble material, that will also exhibit dissolution if you convert it into a nano-sized crystal or nano formulation. And because of this enhanced dissolution, the formulations have greater bioavailability, small drug doses, less toxicity. And these are small, very small, to avoid removal by mononuclear phagocytes. MPS, there is a system in the body. If some bigger particles like bacteria and other things, if they enter into our blood circulation, these phagocytes will come, they will engulf it, they will eat it. So they are called as killer cells. So they are engulfing, and these nanoparticles are sufficiently small. They will not attract these phagocytes. So they escape this MPS system, and they are smaller to escape phagocytes, but they are larger to avoid filtration out by kidney. Otherwise, through kidney, if they are very small, they will be filtered out by the nephrons. That will not happen. Renal filtration will also be avoided because they are sufficiently bigger. They are sufficiently smaller for phagocytes. So they will escape. Means they will remain in the body circulation, systemic circulation for a long time. The drug will remain in the body for a long time. And these have ability to cross most of the cell membranes, including blood-brain barrier. And many times it happens that if you tag these nanoparticles with a specific ligand, like some anti-cancer antibody, let us say, in general, I'm telling, if you tag the nanoparticle with a anti-cancer antibody, directly that antibody will lead you to the cancer cell and it will bind with the receptors. Nanoparticles will not hinder the binding of the drug with the receptor. Okay, so they can interact on the cell surface as well. There is no need that the ligand should be released from the nanoparticle for binding with the receptor. It will bind to the receptor when it is still tagged with the nanoparticle. Different types of nanoparticles are also available. Many things are there. Nowadays, if you see this list, maybe further bigger, like solid lipid nanoparticles are there, liposomes are there, polymeric nanoparticles are there, polymeric micelles are there, then neosomes are there, dendrimers are there, nano suspensions are there, nano emulsions, magnetic nanoparticles, gold, silver nanoparticles, nanotubes, nanopores, and quantum dots. These are some of the, maybe in this list, few of them might have escaped also. But this is a list which comprises of major type of nanopharmaceuticals which are reported in different papers. Many of them are not in the market. Very few are in the market because there are some inherent problems. We will see those inherent problems later. So for brain targeting, what all the nano carriers used? Polymeric nanoparticles are being used, lipid-based nanoparticles are used, inorganic nanoparticles are used, surfactant-based nanoparticle systems are used, dendrimers are used, and carbon nanotubes are used. These are most commonly reported nano carrier systems for targeting the drug to the brain to overcome Alzheimer's. So you can see here different sizes simply. So this biggest particle is actually a nano suspension and the smallest particle is actually here the dendrimer. So literally speaking, dendrimer is the actual nanoparticle. Nano suspension is not even nano when you see the size here. So how we can use them for neurodegeneration or Alzheimer or Parkinsonism or autism related diseases or any of these dementia. So in the field of neurodegeneration, they are interesting biomedical tools which have the potential to resolve different problems associated with Alzheimer or dementia problems. So these nanoparticles can be functionalized. This is another important feature of nanoparticles. You can tag the nanoparticles with some ligand. Okay, so by conjugation to various ligands like antibodies, antibodies to a specific tissue, so that the nanoparticle will not bind anywhere else. The antibody will lead it to the specific target tissue, it will bind there. So drug release will occur there only. Or with ligands like proteins or aptamers can also be. Aptamers are actually small RNA molecules, DNA molecules, which can be tagged with the nanoparticles, so that the nanoparticles will be targeted to a specific tissue. And at therapeutic level, multifunctionalization is also possible. Like, for example, two ligands. One ligand is a drug, second ligand is a leading ligand. Or we can say this is the ligand which leads to a specific tissue. It will bind to the specific receptor, so that the second ligand will be released. Or you can use them for diagnostic purpose also. In diagnosis, what happens? One ligand will enhance the capacity of the nanoparticle to bind to the, let us say, amyloid plaque, or maybe to the tau protein. It will bind, it will enhance the binding, whereas second thing will make it opaque in the molecular imaging. When more such particles are bound, if you take the photograph, you can see it clearly. Wherever amyloid plaques are there, you can see accumulation of these particles, because one ligand has helped to bind to the amyloid plaques, other ligand is a radio opaque substance. So let us see all these, some of these nanoparticulate delivery systems which are used in Alzheimer's therapy one by one. The first one is polymeric nanoparticles, because they are most commonly used and widely reported. You will find thousands of papers concerned to different polymeric nanoparticles. They have, here I am not going to define all those. There is no need, because we are using a suitable polymer and then a drug mixture. Either we will make a nanosphere or we will make a nanocapsule. You can see here, if there is a uniform dispersion of drug in the polymer, it becomes nanosphere matrix. And if there is a coating of the drug particles with the polymer, it becomes nanocapsule. So biodegradability, biocompatibility, because when you want to target to brain, biodegradability and biocompatibility are most important aspects, because there should not be any toxicity due to the nano formulation. And they have long shelf life because of their nano size, and stability during storage. That is natural with most of the nanoparticles. And chances of controlled release and sustained release are also there, like polymeric matrix or nanocapsule or nanosphere. Both will exhibit, depending on the type of polymer you are using, you can get sustained release, controlled release. Normally, size is 10 to 1000 nanometer. And commonly used polymers, you can see natural polymer. Out of that, polysaccharides play a major role, specifically chitosol. It is one of the most commonly sought after polymer for brain targeting purpose, for nanoparticles, for Alzheimer's. And polyglycolic acid, PGA, PLGA. These are three synthetic polymers which are used because of their non-toxic nature. Some of the drugs which are incorporated in these polymeric nanoparticles include like curcumin, neuroprotective peptide, rivastigmine, estradiol. Many such drugs are there. You can see here a big list of drugs. These are the reported papers and patents. I have collected the data from papers as well as patents. The next type of thing is lipid-based nanoparticles. The first and foremost thing, when you talk about lipid, liposome is the first thing which comes into mind. So liposomes, they are most commonly used substances for even brain targeting, nanoliposomes. There is a term created for this. And these are, as we know, majority of us have prepared at one or the other stage, maybe as a practical or as a project or anything, we have prepared liposomes, right? So phosphatidylcholine is the most commonly used phospholipid. And along with that, we can also use phosphatidylethanolammine, PE. It is included when the goal is fusion of liposome with cell membrane. If you want liposome to fuse with cell membrane, then we are using this phosphatidylethanolamine. Otherwise, phosphatidylcholine is the only thing which is used for this purpose. There are some advantages of liposomes, like small size range can be achieved because they are liquids. And these liposomes, they are just like micelles. They can be formed, they can be, all these, the fat molecules can go out, they will come in. Like our cell membrane, liposomes are also fluidic in nature. So we can achieve sufficient small size with liposomes. And another important thing is drug to lipid ratio is very high. With small quantity of lipid, you can encapsulate large quantity of drug. And retention of the encapsulated drug is one important thing, because the drug has a specific nature. It is entrapped here inside, hydrophilic drug. And in the brain, it cannot come out also. It doesn't want to come out because of its hydrophilicity. Brain is totally hydrophobic. And that is the reason for retention of the drug in the liposome. And long circulation lifetime, like more than 6 hours lifetime can be seen. Some of the drugs which are incorporated are curcumin. As you can see, even in polymeric nanoparticles, curcumin is there. In liposomes also curcumin is there. Phosphatidic acid, cardiolipin, XO4, glycofused benzopyrene. These are some of the drugs which are tried for reducing one or the other symptoms of Alzheimer's. And last one, this epigallocatechin gallate. This is actually a antioxidant. For that purpose, it is being used. Next, solid lipid nanoparticles. Actually, in case of liposomes, as I told, they are fluidic, they are liquids. But because of that, to achieve that liquid state, fluidic state, what we have to do, we have to use phosphatidylcholine, which is very, very costly, because of which the cost of liposome becomes too high that patients cannot afford. So now some cheaper alternatives have to be done, and that is done by this solid lipid nanoparticles. Here, we don't use phosphatidylcholine, which is very costly. Instead of that, we use triglycerides. Many triglycerides are available, they are cheap. And sometimes we use pure single triglyceride, or we may go for mixture of glycerides to make this solid lipid nanoparticle. Here, the lipid will make a structure which is solid. It is not fluidic like liposome. That's why it's called as solid lipid nanoparticle. They have these advantages, like hydrophobic core. Inside the core, you can encapsulate hydrophobic drug. And because the hydrophobic drug does not have dissolution, it will not get absorbed. So use of this SLN can avoid that problem. It will cross the membrane and get into circulation. So they provide controlled drug release, improved stability when compared to liposome, because they are solids. And synthesis is cheaper than liposome because of the cheaper substances which we are using. And scaling up is possible because they are solids. Some of the drugs you can see here, like resveratrol is being used for this purpose. You can see this is the drug. And then we have quercetin. This is antioxidant for reducing the oxidative stress in the brain. Erythropoietins are being used. Nicotinamide is being used. Intraperitoneally, it is being administered. In all these drugs have been tested in animals, but not in humans. Piperine is one which is made into polysorbate AT-coated solid lipid nanoparticles. And actually, piperine is known to target the amyloid plaques. Major action is targeting of amyloid plaques. It will not allow amyloid plaques to form. So the next thing is inorganic nanoparticles. These inorganic nanoparticles have a size range of 2 to 100, and most of the times here we come across metallic nanoparticles like gold and silver. These are the two nanoparticles which are most important here, because both are non-toxic, hydrophilic, biocompatible, and stable, because they are metals. So their properties can be modified by controlling the size. If you control the size, properties will change. You can control the shape, you can control surface and domain interactions can be changed so that the properties of these molecules can be changed. And they exhibit different types of properties, like they have electrical properties. All these things we have studied already in colloids. Okay, so like gold and silver nanoparticles, they have their electrical properties. Non-membrane equilibrium, these that we have studied, we are teaching also. Magnetic properties like iron oxide nanoparticles, so that with the help of an external magnet you can target the nanoparticles to brain. If you apply high magnetic field on the skull, these intravenously injected iron oxide nanoparticles containing drug will get directed to brain. And they have optical properties. All these colloid properties we know. And ceramic nanoparticles, this is another thing, which is made up of either calcium phosphate or hydroxyapatite, silica, titania. These are some of the things, but actually these things are not being used for the purpose of Alzheimer therapy, because aluminum, all these divalent cations, one way or other way, they are responsible for inducing formation of amyloid plaques. So these ceramic are not used. Only gold and silver nanoparticles are being used for this purpose. Some of the things you can see here, like gold nanoparticles, large gold nanoparticles, they make amorphous aggregates on the brain lipid bilayer, and smaller gold nanoparticles induce protofibrillary amyloid beta structures. So they are known for their interaction with amyloid beta. So here amine and citrate modified gold nanoparticles. Actually, amines and citrates can be tagged, coating will be done on the gold nanoparticle. With that, if it enters into brain, then naturally they bind more tightly with the amyloid beta plaques. So to enhance plaque interaction, we can do this amine and citrate coatings. And these gold nanoparticles, which are targeted to transferrin antibody, will be there. They will cross blood-brain. They have been tested in animals, and it has been proved beyond doubt that they can cross the blood-brain barrier and accumulate in the brain. Then we have surfactant-based nanocarriers like nanoneosomes, nanoemulsions, nanosuspensions. These are further cheaper. So from liposome, costliest, towards cheaper alternatives we are moving now. And first one, nanoneosomes, they are surfactant-based vesicles. You have to use non-ionic surfactant, which is sterile. That can be done. A combination of cholesterol and non-ionic surfactant will be used. Other substances, other excipients will also be there. To modify the properties of neosome, we can use other excipients also. So I will show when I will show you our work. I will show some of the other substances which have been used in this. And neosomes have high penetrating capacity because they are surfactants. They can penetrate anywhere. And they are structurally similar to liposome, but they are more stable because surfactants are more stable than phospholipids, natural. So neosomes have higher stability, and they can entrap hydrophilic, hydrophobic, both the drugs. If it is hydrophilic in the core, and if it is hydrophobic within the bilayer, they will get entrapped. And they are easy to formulate because all you need is surfactant, cholesterol, make a mix and size reduce it. That's it. Scale up is easy. Large scale manufacturing is also possible. And surfactants naturally they help in enhancement of stability. This we have seen in emulsion suspension also. So naturally stability of these nanoneosomes will be higher. And this many papers are there which are dealing with stability aspects of nanoneosomes. And they are cheaper when compared to liposomes because we don't use phospholipids. And they enhance the therapeutic index of the drug. Neosomes can enhance, means they reduce the toxicity and increase the efficiency. And major advantages like pharmacokinetics will be changed, because now the drug is made more soluble, more bioavailable. All these things, bioavailability, all those things will change. That means pharmacokinetic parameters will also, like AUC, it will change. If pure drug is given, AUC will be different. If it is drug encapsulated or incorporated into neosomes, the AUC will be different. So all these advantages, whatever we are talking, it is just possible if size is slightly more than 100 nanometer. Okay, if the size is less than 100 nanometer, the number of molecules, surfactant molecules involved will be very less. So the size of the particle will be less, and many advantages will not be there if the particle size is very small. If the particle size becomes bigger, nearer to 1000 nanometer, then they will become micelles. There also they lose all the things. So 100 to 200 nanometer is the ideal size range for nano neosomes. Then we have nano emulsion. These are one of the most popular carrier system for crossing the blood-brain barrier. Okay, like 50 to 100 nanometer will be the size of this. They are O by W emulsions, and they are thermodynamically stable. We know they are transparent, either transparent or translucent. They have potential to sustain the drug release. It is possible because they are emulsions. The drug is dissolved in oily phase and aqueous phase is the continuous phase. So naturally, drug release can be slowed down. And small size range allows high payload of drugs. Payload means entrapment efficiency will increase. They are ideal for nose to brain delivery. They are most commonly, in fact, nano emulsions are most commonly used nose to brain targeting systems. You can find thousands of papers concerned to nano emulsions only, and they stabilize. Actually, this is one important advantage. If a substance, if a drug is undergoing hydrolysis, they will stabilize. They will reduce the hydrolysis because the drug is in oil. So preparation, two methods are there: high pressure homogenization and microfluidization. So both these techniques, equipments are available. You have to, it is just like reducing the size, particle size reduction. We will make a coarse emulsion. We will pass through this microfluidizer, or we will pass it through the high pressure homogenizer to certain number of cycles, so that the particle or the droplet size will decrease. Some of the drugs which are incorporated into these are like memantine. Even though memantine is a brain acting drug, but still its bioavailability in the brain can be enhanced using nanoemulsions. Donepezil is also used for the same purpose, and Huperzina A, which is a acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, which has been incorporated into nanoemulsions. And here, lactoferrin, an iron-binding glycoprotein, is widely expressed in the brain. Why this happens? This drug nanoemulsion modified with lactoferrin. Actually, two ligands are there. One is this Huperzina, second is lactoferrin, because this is an iron-binding glycoprotein which is expressed in brain endothelial cells, and they are highly utilized in the treatment of age-related neuro disorders. So this drug concentration can be increased. And naringenin, which is shown here, this is another drug which is being used in nanoemulsion formulation. And this is meant for intranasal administration. And this naringenin helps, it will bind to amyloid plaques and tries to dissolve it. So neuroprotective substance. Nano suspensions, next dosage form. These are the drugs of submicron colloidal dispersion. It is just like nanoemulsion only, but the thing is, the drug is not in liquid form, it is in solid form. So the drugs which are water insoluble but are soluble in oil, insoluble in water, soluble in oil. High log P substances can be made into nano suspension. And nano suspension can be used for drugs which are insoluble in both water oil. Some drugs are there which are not soluble in water, not soluble in oil. For such drugs also you can use nano suspensions. So for example, like drugs with high melting point, crystal energy is high. High melting point means crystal structure is very strong, so it will not melt. Dissolution also will not occur. But here, if you make it into a nano suspension, enormous surface area, solvent action will be more and dissolution will be enhanced. But when compared to nano emulsions, nano suspensions have been less reported for Alzheimer's disease because the drug is in solid form. In case of nano emulsion, the drug is in molecular dispersion in oil. So it will not cause any damage to the brain tissue. But here, since the drug is in particulate form, maybe that is the reason people are not using it much. So you can see donepezil is used, meloxicam. This is one of the drug which is being used to reduce the inflammation in the brain. It has been made into nano suspension. So now you can see what is the advantage of this. Actually, this is the raw material. Crystal of raw material, they are very big. This is 20 micron scale. So if you do precipitation, recrystallization, then particularly the size will decrease. But after homogenization, you can see the size of these particles. So it is, when compared to this raw material, the particle size is very, very less here. So because of this, surface area has been increased. The last but one is the dendrimer. This is one of the most important formulation, but practically speaking, many people are not using this dendrimer. But I don't know the reason behind it exactly, because I did not find much papers concerned to dendrimers for Alzheimer's disease. Actually, they are three-dimensional spherical branched architectural entities, where these green colored things are actually the drugs which are bound to the dendrimer. And they are of nano size. Polydispersity index is very low, means uniform sized particles can be seen. High payload means entrapment is very high. Solubility is improved, viscosity is less, stability is high in this. Non-immunogenic. They don't cause any, because of their small size only, they will not cause any immune response. And they are biocompatible and they can be used for site-specific drug delivery, because some of these substances which are used, because here you are tagging the drug. Along with drug, you can tag some specific ligand, other ligand also, which will direct the dendrimer to the specific tissue. So some of the substances used, like haloperidol. Haloperidol dendrimers are reported. There is a patent also concerned to this. Through nasal route, for dose reduction and bioavailability enhancement, it is being used. Propylamine, which is tagged with maltose. And here interaction with the amyloid protein will enhance because of presence of maltose. Then the last one is carbon nanotubes. These are nanostructures which are used, which are just like pipe-like structures. The length of the pipe may be in few micrometers, that's possible, but the diameter is in few nanometers. So it may be a single walled pipe-like structure, or it may be multi-walled. You can see here concentric walls are there. It is the innermost pipe, then you have an intermediate pipe, then you have an outermost pipe also. So like this, concentric graphene-like layers can be formed. And we are classifying them according to the number of carbon layers which are available. Single-walled carbon nanotubes and multi-walled carbon nanotubes. Okay, so the diameter will be up to 100 nanometer, and in case of single-walled, it will be 0.4 to 2 nanometer. That is the diameter, very thin. They have exceptional properties because of their size only. They are ultra lightweight, highly durable, highly stable, thermally stable, chemically stable, and these specifically multi-walled nanotubes, because of their large surface area. 3-4 concentric pipes are there. So surface area increases. Because of that, prolonged half-life can be seen. And they are found in diagnosis, therapy, and other things. Few Alzheimer therapy papers are also there. But here there is a point. Since it is pure carbon, actually pure carbon is always toxic to the body. We say that normally whenever we are eating food, grilled foods are to be avoided. Why? Because charring has occurred. Charring means carbon particles. That is, when you take it orally, carbon particles are not welcome. Then when you inject carbon nanotubes and it reaches brain, that may lead to many toxicities. That is the only reason why carbon nanotubes are less frequently used for pharmaceutical applications. There are pharmaceutical applications, but they are less. So now, in maybe I think, okay, I am in time. So in another 5 minutes, let me tell you some of the things which our group has developed. So here you can see that people in our group, we have done some works. Some of them are faculty members, my colleagues, and some are my students who have done either MPharm or PhD or something like that. So here are some of things like development of nose to brain delivery for Alzheimer's therapy. This was one project work which we did. And beneficial role of Kalyanakam Kashayam in autism spectrum disorder. This is once again similar condition to the in the brain only. It's also neurodegenerative problem. And formulation evaluation of herbal loaded solid lipid nanoparticles and herbal proneosomals for Alzheimer's therapy. And here for treatment of Parkinsonism, we did curcumin loaded albumin nanoparticles. So these are some of the works which we have done. And majority of the things what you can see here is we are concentrating more on herbal products because very few drugs are available. As I told you, 5 drugs are there: acetylcholine inhibitors and memantine. That's all. Apart from that, you don't have much option for the treatment of Alzheimer's. Hence, we have to go for natural products, herbal products, or Ayurveda and all those. So what we did in all those works, what I have shown, whatever we did was use of some established Ayurvedic Unani formulations. Because for memory enhancement in Ayurveda and Unani, many formulations are available. So what we did was, when it can enhance memory, these formulations can be beneficial in Alzheimer's. This was our theory, and we did some work on that. So we have used 3 things here. Kalyanakam Kashayam, that is one of the Ayurvedic medicine which is available in the market. And second is Dhandanenadi Kashayam. This is also available in the market. Third is a Unani medicine, Majuna Falaspa. This is also available as a memory enhancer. All the 3 are memory enhancing substances, memory enhancing medicines in Ayurveda and Unani. So using these 3, we developed SLNs, we developed proneosomes, we developed polymeric nanoparticles. So after that, what we did was we did the testing, whether in case of Alzheimer, we did the testing in intracerebroventricular streptozotocin injection. As I told, with the help of a needle, we will pierce directly the skull of the mice, and then streptozotocin will be injected at a specific dose to induce Alzheimer-like syndrome, where tau and A beta will increase with injection of streptozotocin. Then how much these nanoparticles will overcome, that we have seen. So solid lipid nanoparticles we prepared by using high shear, high pressure homogenization. Proneosomes were prepared with span 60 sterylamine and cholesterol combination, and polymeric nanoparticles prepared by controlled phase separation technique. We used some polysaccharides, because as I am working with natural excipients, I have worked with more than 30-40 polysaccharides from plants. We tested some 3-4 polysaccharides out of that. And albumin was one of them, which we have used for making the nanoparticles. So after making, we studied stability and all other things, whatever we are normally doing, we did all those, and then it was injected, it was administered to the mouse model, mouse Alzheimer model, and we actually evaluated behavioral parameters and biochemical parameters like assessment of learning memory. Morris Watermaid test was done, and novel objection recognition test. This is one of the important thing for measurement of Alzheimer's. If there is Alzheimer, their scores will be less in both these behavioral parameters. And then we did biochemical parameters also, like oxidative stress, brain lipid peroxidation, reduced glutathione, because in case of Alzheimer, glutathione concentration will go down. And if it increases with the drug, then Alzheimer is actually, we are overcoming the disease. Then assessment of brain nitrite levels, assessment of acetylcholinesterase level, assessment of myeloperoxidase. All these things are concerned to either oxidative stress or concerned to the brain functioning. So you can see here, with this was the control. Okay, on this what Morris Watermaid test. So whatever formulations we developed, they exhibited good thing. You can see here. Okay, this is the thing which happened when it was tested, means when streptozotocin was injected, Alzheimer was developed. The animals were unable to identify. They were unable, their scores were less. It was slightly improved when nanoformulations were given. But when we gave the Kashayam and Majune Falasva by oral route, there was effect, but not as good as nanoformulation. The animals scored well in novel object recognition test also. And you can see brain hippocampus glutathione activity. Actually, this was the control. It is supposed to be at this level. And when you inject streptozotocin, it has come down. So when you give donepezil, it increases almost slightly less than the control. But when we give Majune Falasva, you can see the third dose of Majune Falasva give almost nearer to the donepezil. Not as good as donepezil, but still with nanoparticles, we have better activity. So here also, like thiobarbiturate, TB-ARS activity, you can see better results. So here also, when hippocampus interleukin IL-1 activity was tested, these nanoformulations gave good activity. And effect of these formulations on hippocampus, tumor necrosis factor, TNF-alpha. So here also we got better activity. So in control, it is like this. Whereas in case of streptozotocin, it has increased. Now in these formulations, it has come down. So you can see here with Majune Falasva, we got the result almost equivalent to donepezil. So with this, what we can conclude is more than 98% of the available drugs for Alzheimer's disease or for in general dementia or CNS problems, they cannot cross blood-brain barrier, because of which the therapy becomes inefficient. That is one thing. And engineered nanoparticles, which are made up of biocompatible materials. This is important here, because when we are injecting something, when we make something enter into brain, we should have utmost precaution, because brain tissue is very, very sensitive. So we should not cause any damage to the brain tissue because of the formulation. So we have to use only biocompatible materials. They can be used as carriers to overcome this problem of blood-brain barrier crossing. functionalized nanoparticles. Actually, you can bind with some antibodies or some protein, some aptamers, so that they can reach the exact specific tissue. They will enhance the entry of drug into the brain. So, drug-loaded multifunctionalized nanoparticles may offer a better therapy to Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Here, this is based on, the whole presentation is based on my own work, our group's work, as well as some of the reports which are already there, which have been published or which have been patented. So, thank you. If there are any questions,
I request the delegates to kindly post your questions in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask the questions to sir personally. Sir,
there is one question.
Yes.
I think nanoemulsions are OW type only. So the answer is, in case of nanoemulsions, we go for O by W because of their stability. If oil is continuous phase, normally stability will be less. If oil is dispersed phase, stability will be more. Because of that, O by W are preferred. And when we are using high quantity of surfactant, if you are using high quantity of oil, dispersion of surfactant may become a problem. So in case of self nano-emulsifying systems and all, where you are using very high surfactant ratio, normally we have to go for oil as a continuous phase.
There's one more question. Which
Yeah.
of these nanovesicular carriers have been used in the highest loading efficiency?
Actually, loading efficiency is very high with neosomes and liposomes. Liposomes, neosomes are as on date reported with highest loading efficiencies. Other things are there.
One more question. Nanosomes can be used for diagnostic purpose for a disease?
Presently, I didn't find any paper concerned to diagnosis of disease using nanoneosomes, but we can try. Since there is no paper, you can try yourself. That's possible. We can develop. What is there? Because nanotechnology was not there, we have developed. Similarly, we can develop, along with therapeutic, we can develop diagnostic applications also.
Yes. Any other questions are there?
There is one
Sir,
question.
one more
madam.
question. Yes, sir.
Why nano suspensions are not preferred much? Because in nano suspensions, we are using the solid as such in nano size. And if that solid directly enters into brain, what may happen? Physical damage to the tissue can happen. Because of that, nobody wants to take that risk. Maybe that's the reason.
Sir, so there's one more question. All these nano deliveries like liposomes or neosomes, which are the best?
Actually, out of all these, whichever is fluidic, liposomes, they are as on date also considered as best. Then nanoneosomes are next best. And then third is SLN. Because SLNs, when they come in contact with oily, they will dissolve. So that is possibility.
So one more question. How can we administer PLGA nanoparticles via nasal route?
Directly in the form of nasal spray or nasal drops.
So one more question from our side.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. So are
Yes,
these
madam.
dendrimers a polymers, sir?
No. Actually, dendrimers are not exactly polymers. We are using small molecules and they will be linked together. They will develop into a spherical structure.
So then is it a nanoparticle then?
Yes, it is nanoparticle only.
Okay, sir.
Because their size is in the nano range.
Thank you, sir. It was a very exhaustive session and
Thank
a
you,
lot of
madam.
information we could get from your slides. And also we could come to know that Unani medicine you have changed into nanoparticles
Yes,
and nanopharmaceuticals, which we generally call it as, which are used for the treatment of Alzheimer's. It was a very informative session. Feedback is coming in the same way. All of our in the chat box, they are writing it was a very informative session. There's one more question, sir. Why
Yeah.
dendromites have been limited application in brain therapy?
actually, because a chemical method of synthesis is involved in dendrimers. It is not just like nano emulsions, where because of high quantity of surfactant, they will self-form. But such thing is not there in dendrimers. A chemical reaction is needed. So other impurities and many things will come in picture here, because of which people don't prefer it.
So there's one more question. Nanocrystals, are they same as nanosuspensions?
Yeah, we can consider nano suspensions are actually suspensions of nanocrystals only.
Fine. So one person has asked to share your mobile number, sir.
Yeah,
So,
you can share, madam.
yeah,
Anyway,
sure,
you
I
have
will
my
share
mobile
it.
number. You can
Sure,
share
sure.
with the participants. No
Sure,
problem.
sir. Yes, sir. Sure. I will share it, sir. Sir, I ask now I ask Dr. S.P. Remer, sir, to conclude the session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your excellent presentation.
Thank you,
The
sir.
session was very informative and interactive. And, with this, we come to end of first day of this faculty development program. And tomorrow 9:30.
Tomorrow's program is scheduled from 9:30. So I request all the delegates to join at 9:30. I thank Giriraj sir for his voluminous and a very exhaustive seminar presentation today. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you
Thank you,
for
ma'am.
interacting and sharing your expertise with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to interact with so many people, which was normally not possible because of this lockdown
Yes.
and other. Because of this online, I was able to do this.
Yes.
Thank you.
On behalf of Keli College of Pharmacy, Hubli and Kaher, I thank you. Thank you for your expertise, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam.
Okay. So tomorrow's session will start at 9:30. Any issues are there for the delegates regarding the session for the conduct? Tomorrow there will be totally 3 sessions conducted. Morning 2 sessions and afternoon 1 session. And the feedback for today's session, the link will be shared tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll share the two different links for the 2 different sessions. That is feedback day 1 and feedback day 2. Thank you. Thank you for joining since morning. It was very exhaustive, I know.
Please repeat.
Pardon?
Can you please repeat for the protocol of feedback?
Well, actually, the feedback will be taken on every day, and a common feedback will be taken from the ATL itself on the last day.
Okay, then the feedback form will be shared on WhatsApp group.
Yes, a Google form will be made and it will be shared on the WhatsApp as well as it will be mailed to you personally.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, fine. Thank you so much. Okay, so see you back tomorrow. Kindly join at 9:15 so that we can start the session on time at 9:30. Yes, attendance has been recorded. Yes, we have a cloud attendance recording on the Zoom platform. So we are recording your attendance since start of the session to the end of the session. And the same will be communicated to the AICTE portal for their attendance and certificate issue. It is not manually done, it is automatic on the Zoom platform. Any other queries? Any other queries? So shall we exit the meeting now and we will rejoin the meeting tomorrow for the day 2 session. That is at 9:15. Kindly join on time so that we can start the session at 9:30. I hope the schedule is shared to your mails as well as to your Google WhatsApp group so that you be on time. Content, you want the presentation contents? Yes, presentation contents will be releasing the links on the YouTube so that you can watch this session frequently as many times as you want. Yes, PPT also will be shared at the end of the last day. We'll be sharing all the PPTs to you through the email. Yes, sir's mobile number I will be putting into the WhatsApp group today. Any other queries? I think so. If there are no queries, we'll end the session. Thank you very much for your patient listening. Since morning you were with us. So tomorrow, please join at 9:15 a.m. so that we can start the session at 9:30. So tomorrow we have 3 sessions. Totally 3 sessions will be conducted tomorrow. The session 1 will be by Dr. Pramod TM, Principal and Professor, JSS College of Pharmacy. The topic for the session is opportunities and challenges of 3D printing, printed pharmaceutical dosage. And 11 to 11:15, there will be a break. Again, 11:15, we are going to start the session. The topic is skin delivery of drugs, nano drug delivery approaches by Dr. Srinivas Mutalik, sir. He is Professor and Principal of Manipal College of Pharmaceutical Sciences, Manipal. Then we'll be going for a lunch break. 3 o'clock, again, we'll be starting the session 5 by Dr. J. Timashetty, sir. The topic is spring and parachute approaches in product development. Sir is a professor and head Department of Pharmaceutics, Bapuji College of Pharmacy, Davangere. So these are the 3 sessions which we have planned for tomorrow. Hope so you all join in time, and all the 3 sessions will be as successful as it was today. Thank you. Thank you one and all. So we'll exit for the meeting today and we'll rejoin tomorrow. Thank you.